I am happy we are joined by Dan O'Sullivan. Dan is somebody whose work I've been following for a long time now. He's something of a three-level scorer in the media world. He does great long-form journalism that I've been going all the way back to Deadspin up until recently. He's also great on tweets. He was the delete Uber hashtag founder, and he's also one of my favorite personalities to hear on podcasts and indeed get provoked on streams like the Go Off Kings. Dan, thank you so much for joining us today.
What an introduction. Thank you so much. That's yeah, you really went above and beyond on that one, Matt. Thank you so much. It's great to be here. I'm a big fan of you guys as well.
It's great to have you. You have a new show now that I am a huge fan of. It's hit me at the right time. We'll get into this about Capone, but just to kind of introduce folks. And you call it a podcast, but I'll say people should watch the YouTube because particularly on the Cray Twins episode, I remember there being a visual element that was pretty important with some of the photos you have. But anyway, before we get into that, what is the podcast, The Outfit, about?
Yeah, thanks, man. The Outfit, I co-host it with my co-host, Alana Hope Levinson. And every week we tell a different story about organized crime and how it explains America and the world, really. My premise is that organized crime has really been underanalyzed as a way to explain the world we live in, whether it's the economy, our government, and all these aspects of life that are mystifying sometimes. And so my background, has been at least in part in writing about the mob. And so every week we tell a different mob story and sort of connect it with the broader significance. And whether that's the Cray Twins in London, like you mentioned, or Sammy the Bull Gravano, or the guy I wrote about for years, Ken Edo, who was the only Japanese American member of the Chicago mob. There's a lot to dig into with all these. So it's been a lot of fun. And thank you for the kind words on that.
Let's start with the big guy himself, Al Capone. I don't know if you're a Thomas Pynchon fan, Dan, but in the new Shadow Ticket...
I saw the new movie.
The new movie's pretty good,
yeah,
but I'd be curious your take on the Shadow Ticket, the new novel from Pynchon, because Al Capone plays a role, and The Outfit is all over that. So yeah, let's talk about what was The Outfit? What was its relationship to capitalism?
Yeah, I heard that was in the new book. I haven't read it, but so look, the Outfit, probably most people have seen The Untouchables and they've seen that version of things, but The Outfit was literally what Capone referred to as that's my outfit. This was the criminal organization that he was sort of bequeathed, that he's the most famous boss of, and this is the mafia in Chicago for much of the 20th century leading into today. It still exists in a much diminished form. And we named our podcast after that in part because obviously we're fashion nuts and we love that. But also my feeling is, looking at the history of the Chicago Outfit and of the mafia in general, it's really the history of modern America. And that's an economic history, a political history. It seems to, if you look at what the Capone organization did in the decades after he left the scene too, I think you get an explanation of why America is like the way it is that usually gets excised from history books, economics textbooks, and so forth. And it's really about what David Chase said inspired him to make The Sopranos, right? He said it had two subjects, which was death and money. And that drive is perfectly embodied in the mafia, in the Chicago Outfit, without a lot of the niceties we see applied to other forms of business, other political niceties. So it's sort of the shadow history to me of America, and we do international episodes too that delve into it in other places as well. Obviously, it's a global phenomenon.
Capone, I'm interested. You mentioned he was a bookkeeper, right, in early life, and that's a line in Pynchon about like the outfit's supernatural type bookkeeping. Am I misremembering that?
No. You're absolutely right. That one biography stated. I mean, and again, this is kind of interesting too, just to bring up, right? Like the history is so contended over too. So one biography by a guy named Lawrence Bergreen says that he did work as a bookkeeper in Baltimore for a period, that he had a period of legitimacy. And then other biographers say that never happened, right? So we are still dealing with just the basic facts of his life in an interesting way. But what is undeniable is they were scrupulous bookkeepers to the penny, and for good reason, which is the name of the game is making money with these guys. And whether or not Capone kept his accounts himself, he did have a wonderful guy named Greasy Thumb Guzik, who was his bookkeeper. Jake Guzik, who died over his account books, which led to the mobsters dragging his large corpse home, telling his wife, "Your husband's dead," and he died in bed also. So business waits for no man,
So Greasy Thumb Guzik is also in the Pynchon novel, and not to make this again sorry, David, I can tell David's already like, Matt's making this about Pynchon again. But Greasy Thumb Guzik is given credit for the Dawes Plan, which basically helps Nazi Germany rearm. I don't know if that's historically true, but that's a Pynchon invention.
Jake Guzik did a lot of terrible things. I think was involved in brothels in his early days. I think even that would be going a bit far for him. He was also Jewish. So in fairness to Jake Guzik, I don't think we can put that at his doorstep. But a lot of bribery, a lot of that,
What, I think it was Capone himself was asked about maybe the American way and socialism. Can you tell people about that story? I thought that was fascinating.
So this was an incident where a British journalist, who some of your listeners might know, Claude Cockburn, from the famous Cockburn family, Patrick Cockburn, a lot of journalists in that family, he went to the hotel in Chicago in the South Loop where Capone had his headquarters. I think this was, I forget the year exactly, it was 1929, 1930, somewhere around there. And it was for a London newspaper, and he interviewed Capone through a connection he had, which was Machine Gun Jack McGurn, who, as the name implies, was just a ruthless hitman, and interviews him. And it's this very funny interview where Capone, he really sounds like a kind of a Facebook commenter or something. He's like, I run a racket along strictly American lines. I got no time for this pinko Bolshevik stuff. And I mean, look, this must have been music to Coburn's ears, being a, English socialist writer. But, he says essentially that, all the lies, I'm a self-made man, and, we got to, seize this opportunity by the reins, and every cliche you could think of. And there's also this weird thing that he keeps dipping his fingers in this little pool of rose water with rose petals floating in it, which is such a weird rich guy thing. I don't know what to make of that. But so, I talk about that in the first episode of The Outfit, just because to me it's a perfect encapsulation. Like, I don't think he was joking to a degree that that's how he saw himself. And, is it that ridiculous that he's saying that? I don't know. I don't think so. I think he certainly has a case to make that he's either the worst form of capitalism or the purest. I'm not sure which.
Well, I mean, that's what I wanted to ask you about is like, how is the mob kind of like relating to like the system in Chicago and in the country at large? Like, because I feel like the kind of pop understanding of the mob, or maybe the kind of like basic lefty understanding of the mob, is that the mob kind of fills a space. So like, oh, people don't want to, like, there's a need for certain kinds of work to get done. Italians in particular aren't really like the first people to get these good jobs. Is that what it is? Is just kind of filling a role? Is it something that like, oh, there's a necessity to have a kind of, thuggish, violent arm, kind of like policing the poor and working class in these cities. I mean, what really is like the kind of hole or space that the mob is operating in the system?
So that's a great question. And I think to answer that, if you go back to Italy, the answer becomes interesting, right? Which is, how did and mafia is kind of a difficult term, but for shorthand, let's say mafia. How did the mafia actually form in southern Italy? And we go back, and you have to go back to the 19th century when Italy was formed into a state from these many smaller states, and ones that really, in many respects, could have been different countries, right? To the point that the languages are not mutually intelligible. So the Italian Risorgimento, right, the reordering of Italy into a state, it also meant that southern Italy, which remains the poorest part of Italy, is very difficult to govern. It's not well built up. Politically, it's a little bit of a nightmare. And the deal that gets worked out to this day, in many respects, is we will hand political power to certain people just to keep the peace there. And that's the deal, right? And you'll be my proconsul for Sicily or Calabria or these other places. And likewise, on the ground in Italy, you have these landowners who are absentee landowners who do not want to live in southern Italy or live in the cities. And they have these plantations, and they need people to take care of them for them. And this is where the mafia comes from, and the Cosa Nostra in Sicily. It comes from these guys who are really a state within a state, authority figures in areas that lack authority. And I think this is the best way to define a mafia. It's a shadow government. It's a state within a state. There are many things that the Cosa Nostra in Sicily in the 19th century does not share with the Chicago outfit in the 20th century. But to me, the most important thing they share, they are a shadow government. They are pulling the strings behind the scenes. The politics in Chicago at that time, obviously, are in many respects a byproduct of those machinations, not the other way around, right? Where, but incredibly dynamic. And again, going back to the 19th century in New York, in all these cities, there is a machine politics at work where you can see how Italian immigrants escaping that are going to find, well, this is just like home, So that's a long answer to that question, but I would say really they mimic the authority of a state, particularly in its ability to tax and to dole out violence.
I've been fascinated about this for a number of years. I remember we on the Majority Report, we had a caller from somewhere in the South, and they were talking. They basically said like the people in my circle and around me are basically all scammers, and I was sort of shocked by that. But also like, we watch Sopranos. We see like this is sort of we call it the deep state as like but this is sort of deep private, right? Like a huge part of there's a huge sort of submerged sector of illicit economic activity that I think played a key role in raising Trump's coalition up to one that could win. Am I overstating the size of this sort of thing?
No, I think it's a great point, and I think I forget who said this, that some journalist talking about how it always seems like New York or California or Illinois has the most corruption cases in the country. And their point is, no, they have the most journalists, right? So if you had a similar saturation of journalists in Alabama, and I'm sure they have, great journalists too, but it's just not as saturated with news. How many daily newspapers does New York have compared to, these news deserts? I absolutely don't believe for a second that, that these other places don't have this level of corruption. I mean, I look at, I look at a guy like Mike Johnson or whatever, and I'm like, what kind of dark skeletons does this guy have lurking in his closet? I mean, the Supreme Court is like one of the best examples right now of just absolutely obscene, naked corruption. On par with when the Chicago outfit was buying judgeships in Cook County. Up until the 80s, I should add. It really didn't get interrupted till then. The Federalist Society absolutely functions in a similar way to the downtown guys of the Chicago mob, making sure this guy got this judgeship, this guy got this job. So it's just how you frame it, but absolutely not, in my opinion.
Now I want to move to the Cray twins. I spent a summer in London. And
wait, just one quick thing before, if you don't mind, Matt. I want to ask Dan. Dan, do you know anything about Hot Springs, Arkansas?
I do, yeah.
I'll tell you, for folks who don't know, Hot Springs, Arkansas is a little town in Arkansas, and I went there just because I was passing through Arkansas. I had no idea about the connection.
Yeah.
And you drive through the main street, and there's just Al Capone shit everywhere, and I just couldn't believe it. But these guys, they love fucking hanging out in Hot Springs, Arkansas, right?
That's a city, and it's funny. There's a lot of towns that claim a connection with Al Capone that actually do not have one. Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan being my favorite. He never went there. But Hot Springs, Arkansas is, in many respects, was the Las Vegas before Las Vegas existed, which is sort of lost to history. And maybe we'll talk about that later, that the mob is always looking for places they can migrate to where they will be absolutely able to control the political and law enforcement structure there. And Hot Springs, Arkansas was such a place. You could go party, gamble, meet women. And yeah, a guy named Oni Madden from New York, an Irish gangster, was retired there, was the big cheese there for a long time. So it's one of those colorful places that's sort of forgotten in American history. But I'm glad you had a good time.
I did.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. I've never heard of the first Las Vegas being in Arkansas.
Yeah, it was in Arkansas.
So let's, as I was saying, the Cray twins. I had a sociology teacher that taught me for like 4 weeks when I was doing a summer study abroad program, and he was obsessed with the Cray twins. He he sort of dressed like a gangster. He was a very funny guy. I was unaware that there was a incident with a guy named Lord Robert Boothby that pretty much, I mean, let me just step back. One of the reasons I like to read history is because I think people can catastrophize the present, and in a way that says like, oh, we're dealing with some sort of new type of evil. And I'll say that the Lord Boothby thing is just a British trial run of the Epstein affair, is like basically, right?
Yes. I mean, this is, part of why we did an episode on the Cray twins and Boothby. So just to give some context, so the Cray twins are two of the spookiest gangsters you'll ever see. They are twins, Ronnie and Reggie. They look almost identical. They are these hulking guys in these dark black suits. And they were, London mob kingpins in the swinging 60s era of London, starting out as boxers and then moving into the nightlife scene and all this. And, part of what's interesting about them, Ronnie, who is the more psychotic of the two, was more or less openly gay. Reggie, bisexual, possibly, some very, incest, a lot of strange stuff going on with these two guys. But one of the things that Ronnie did was really, he was really a pederast. He really was a sexual abuser of young boys and men, and saw that, reading books about Al Capone, his hero, saw that a key to success was corrupting police, corrupting political elites. And one way he had to do that is he brushed up increasingly against high society in the West End of London, in these clubs they controlled, and in the East End of London at boxing matches, at parties where gay, wealthier men from the West End would go, was, if I put this stream of working class young men on offer to these wealthy, politically connected, closeted gay men or bisexual men in the West End. I not only have it in to the political establishment, I have blackmail material too. And that's where a guy like Bobby Boothby comes in, Lord Boothby, who is a very recognizable type of British politician. He's this rich guy who gets into politics, never really does anything of consequence, is always cash poor. Like he's kind of like Boris Johnson. He's just always stumbling into stuff. He's constantly having sexual affairs with people of both genders. And he's a big fat target. And so Ronnie Cray, sets him up. And then it's to the point that he has him so under control that he's having him intercede on his behalf in the House of Lords. Like really astonishing stuff. So these connections really almost put the Crays above prosecution. They had a politician, at least one from each party in Parliament. And frankly, probably would have been untouchable were it not for the fact that they were so nuts that they were killing people in in public. So, the Epstein, there was just a thread this morning I saw that Senator Ron Wyden just expanding, the findings that he was giving about the relationship of J.P. Morgan to Jeffrey Epstein. And it's in the billions of dollars deposited with J.P. Morgan. So, Ronnie Cray sort of walked so that Jeffrey Epstein could run, I guess.
Yeah, and people should listen to the episode for the media element of it, too, including payoffs to people who did proper payoffs elicited from publications that actually did proper journalism, but were like, sorry, we realized we shouldn't have published that.
Yeah, that's a really tragic aspect of it, that journalists nailed Boothby on these connections to the Crays and were forced to admit libel for publishing the truth because, of course, they got to the owners of the newspapers, which is, relevant today. I mean, it's obviously happening as we speak. So that was a dispiriting thing. And, once it's kind of a once bitten, twice shy type thing, because they did that. The other journalists backed off, and that meant at least 2 more people lost their lives who probably wouldn't have otherwise.
It's crazy because I will say the lecture series that I got on the Cray twins spent a lot of time on how they were treated like heads of state, basically, when they died, and just the pictures of the funeral and people lying in the street. It's unbelievable. When you say shadow government, like people treat them like leaders of shadow governments. One final thing I want to, before we let you go, Dan, is Cuba. I've always been fascinated by Cuba, not just as ancillary to my, maybe indulgent interest in the JFK assassination, but what is the role of Cuba first pre-revolution and also with a lot of those mobsters, once again, playing a role. We always think of them as oppositional to the government, but playing a sort of like role or at least having discussions with our government.
Absolutely. So, David, you mentioned Hot Springs, Arkansas, right? And take this strategy of, dating back to Al Capone's predecessors. They called it the Roadhouse strategy, right? Well, if Chicago is a big city, it's a little hot, it has reformers in it. You go 10 miles outside of Chicago and set up a roadhouse where you can run women and booze and all this stuff. And it's a little town. You can pay off the 2 cops who live there, the mayor, whatever, and it's cheap. Hot Springs is an extension of that, and Cuba is an extension of that, right? It's a place we can go to where it's going to be friendly, it's going to be safe, we can buy off the local authorities, no problem, and really have our own things set up there. So pre-revolution, there are longstanding ties going back to Prohibition to rum running, right? Obviously, Cuba, a big source of illegal alcohol, and the rum runners would bring it to what they call Rum Row, where it'd be literally a line of ships outside the zone, and buyers could come up and pick up their booze and go back, and the Coast Guard just couldn't get them all. So those relationships forged during Prohibition lead after Prohibition to let's start setting up Cuba as a junket spot 90 miles off Florida, where we control the casinos. It's our thing. The government is not going to cause us any trouble because we own them. And none of these pesky authorities, none of these taxmen, it'll be our own thing. Obviously, Fidel Castro puts a crimp in that when he comes to power, arrests the mob boss from Tampa for a time, Traficante, and they're going to lose their investments on this, right? And I should add, the amount of Cuban disgust with these casinos and the junketeers coming into Cuba is considerable, and it plays a factor in the revolution in Cuba. These disgusting Americans coming there, abusing their women, right? I mean, it's really gross stuff. And so after that, obviously the not just the CIA, but the right wing, I should say, really in America, talking about how we lost China, now we lost Cuba, even though, of course, it's a little unclear at first if Castro's a communist. There's a lot of pressure from the right wing to do something about this. And the CIA and their brilliance, these Ivy League CIA agents, they get it in their head that the mafia might be a good ally in at least undermining and perhaps killing Castro. This is a typical harebrained scheme to me. But the mafia, and particularly the guys that they go to in this from the Chicago mob, what I find interesting about it is the mafia has a long history of fleecing the government when turned to for help. During World War II, they're tasked with helping protect some Navy yards in Brooklyn. They don't do anything. When they invade Sicily during World War II, every mafia chieftain in every village becomes the translator, or has a relative become the translator for the American forces and British forces. It sets them up for great post-war success. Lucky Luciano gets out of prison on the basis of this and is deported to Italy. So they never really help him out, but they get a lot of credit. And so the guy that is the main guy who's approached for this is a guy named John Roselli, who's the Chicago outfit emissary to LA mostly. And he sees a great opportunity. I don't know if it's to get into Cuba. Maybe there's the hope there that'll work out. But again, I think primarily to have blackmail material on the federal government, to have a chit that they can trade in for favors. And he enlists Sam Giancana in this. I don't think they actually, I am not sure, it's a matter of some contention how much they actually do. Whether there's a boomerang effect on what happens in Dallas in 1963 is maybe outside the scope of this. All I will say is that the best evidence I'm aware of for there being a conspiracy in Dallas that day is something that happened in front of everyone, happened on live television, and it's Chicago outfit associate Jack Ruby killing Oswald. Putting aside everything else, there was a lot of furious claims to dismiss Ruby's connections to organized crime. And I don't feel comfortable saying a lot about the JFK assassination other than being, this is my bailiwick kind of, that is hogwash. You look at Jack Ruby's pedigree, he was an outfit gangster. So make of that what you will.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I mean, I've always heard a lot of the things that the gangsters get cited as perhaps knowing that it was going to happen or something like that. And I never really know how much to credit that as just like gangster bravado versus, actually, Angleton told me that we're going to whack him on this day.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Dan Moldea, the journalist he probably knows more about Jimmy Hoffa than anyone else. This is a serious guy. He says, he considers, Dallas 1963 to be a mafia hit. And, I think that there's actually some strong evidence for that. There's a plot that's almost totally forgotten from about a month earlier in Chicago where it's identical to what happened in Dallas, but just that it's happening in Chicago. And so if that's true, which the Secret Service agent Abraham Bolden insists was true, then the Oswald thing doesn't make any sense, right? If the same plot was happening in the Chicago outfit stronghold. But I should probably stop talking about that before I, get whacked.
You can leave it to me from there. I always make an allusions to Abraham Bolden. People will say, Google the first black Secret Serviceman and see what he had to say. Dan, the show can be seen on the Higher Ground YouTube channel and on anywhere podcasts are listened to. It's a great show. I can't recommend people go subscribe to it now enough. Is there anything else you want to say? Where should people follow you? As Sullyville.io?
Yeah, I'm at Sullyville.io. I'm on Blue Sky at O'Sullyville and on Instagram at the same. And it's been great doing the outfit with Headgum and Higher Ground, and you can watch all the YouTube episodes, find the episodes wherever they're found. So thanks so much for the kind words and for having me on to talk about it.
Thanks, Dan.